October 18th, Rolling Stone released a scoop that the FBI had raided the home of national security journalist James Gordon Meek months earlier. But they omitted a key fact in that report, which was why the home was raided. Now, Rolling Stone published, quote, Meek appears to be on the wrong side of the national security apparatus, suggesting that he was targeted for his national security reporting, his journalism. But the author of that Rolling Stone article, reporter Tatiana Siegel, had learned from her sources that actually his home was raided as part of a federal investigation into really disturbing child sex abuse, images of child sex abuse, child porn. Not something publicly revealed until recently when NPR reported on it. So why did Rolling Stone suggest that Meek was targeted for his coverage of national security rather than reportedly something completely unrelated and truly vile and justified for law enforcement? So this is a personal thing for me because I have a long history of feuds with Rolling Stone magazine. One of my biggest early successes of my career was calling them out for the gang sexual assault at University of Virginia that they had this big story on, and it turned out it never happened. The person that they'd written this story about, Jackie, she had made the whole thing up. She accused someone who didn't exist. It was a whole catfishing thing, actually. It was really dramatic. They got sued. The author of that story has never written again. They were successfully sued by an administrator at UVA who was wronged by it, by the fraternity in question, all sorts of people. So I've been criticizing Rolling Stone's shoddy journalism practices for a long time. They particularly have a problem with this subject, sexual misconduct, somehow. So the editor-in-chief of Rolling Stone is a friend. This is according to reporting from NPR. He's a friend or an associate or acquaintance of the national security reporter, Meek. And he had edited the article to take out that the accusation was child pornography. And then he had published on it without that reporter who wrote the story knowing. And then I think she subsequently left Rolling Stone. I would gather that she's the one telling NPR that this is how it went down to kind of rehabilitate herself, because she looks like she covered up, but she's saying the editor-in-chief of Rolling Stone did that. Yeah, so this isn't even, it obviously implicates the editorial standards at Rolling Stone because it's an editor-in-chief, but this isn't like a reporter's issue. If anything, the reporter was undermined, the quality of her reporting was undermined. It's really bad. Because you're saying that the edits were made and the story was published before she had a chance to look at the edits. So they basically substantively changed her story without her consent, and then that's what NPR is saying happened. That is wild. On many levels. There have been much smaller journalism scandals. I remember there was an issue at the Intercept while I was there where a headline was written that was factually inaccurate. And then it was published, and then the writer wasn't responsible for the headline, but got a lot of flack for the headline. I think it was actually a Li Fong story. Stuff like that happens. This is stuff that happens. This is substantively changing the content of the story. Sometimes a copy editor will change a headline, and this even happens on our show. Sometimes someone will make a headline, and I'll be like, "Oh, that's not exactly what I said," but it's not. But to do so with a clear motive here, it's more than just a copy editing error or an editor who doesn't fully understand the gist of a story. This was the editor-in-chief, not someone who usually goes in and copy edits the thing. That's incredible. So do you know about if there has been any substantive backlash for the editor-in-chief? So it's getting there's been a lot of criticism from NPR and other outlets. Rolling Stone has kind of, it used to be, I think, thought of as a very anti-establishment kind of thing. Obviously it has music, pop culture, etc. But also Matt Taibbi was a journalist there. There was a lot of kind of crusading national security reporting, calling BS on the Iraq War, that kind of stuff. I would say it's totally transformed itself into like a very simplistic, never Trump kind of attitude. A lot of very shaming COVID writing. Every time a celebrity says something like to ivermectin, they get all kind of hot and bothered about it. Some of their reporting on the availability, what was this about ivermectin and people going crazy, and it's like you can't even find it on shelves because people are so hoodwinked by what Joe Rogan said, originated with them, and it was not totally accurate. So I think it's become a much more hectoring kind of just liberal establishment paper. That's interesting. I used to have an editor there who was very supportive back in maybe 2017 when I was freelancing, and they seemed to have a lot of interest in my kind of Democrat criticism takes at the time, in the kind of the post-2016 Bernie campaign era. And they seemed very open to it then, although I did start to get a little bit of pushback when I would try to do articles about Trump.
pointing out certain Democratic hypocrisies with respect to him in particular. So, look,
they definitely seemed like they were rooting for Spotify to end its deal with Joe Rogan. There's a lot of misinformation panic. Again, this is very common to the mainstream media now, but I would put them, unfortunately, in that same category.
Well, this seems to be above and beyond kind of a cultural shift toward liberalism. This is a real indictment of their journalism practices, and hopefully it's an issue where kind of the head of the snake can be taken care of while the rest of the people at the institution who have better
it's not the first time. They were responsible for one of the greatest journalistic screw-ups in like the entire history of the medium with that UVA story. People forget that story was wild, and it got really big, and it was sort of hitting at a time right before Me Too, but there was a lot of attention being paid to the rape on campus, kind of the idea that 1 in 4 women were victimized by this, and it was so barbaric what was described in this magazine that she was like ritualistically brought up stairs and like candles were lit and she was really awfully violently.
What happened in that instance to the writer? Are you saying the writer of that story never wrote again?
Yes, and actually the writer of that story had written also about sexual misconduct previously in the military, and a church abuse story that I swear to you is the only church abuse story I've ever looked into and had any doubt about the underlying validity. The person she accused in the story went to his grave denying it, and it turned out the person who accused him was like evading criminal charges by giving information. Anyway.
Well, again, I hope that this is an issue. In this instance, it wasn't the writer's fault. It was the editor's fault. Yes. So I'm hopeful that, again, I have some hesitation writing off entire media companies because there are a lot of people who work there.
But it's a different era.
And in this case, the journalist is you think that they're the one that even blew the whistle on this story, so they're certainly not the ones in the wrong. It's this editor-in-chief who went so far out of their professional capacity to weigh in to protect a colleague of theirs. So hopefully that there is accountability where accountability needs to fall, and this reporter's reputation isn't smeared by having been a useful idiot in preserving the reputation of this person who's now been accused of possessing child porn.
Yeah, absolutely. I would like to hear more about how this all came to be. So good work on NPR, absolutely, for calling this out. And maybe it's too insidery, but it's a
no, it's a good one. It's a good
story
one,
I'm interested in. We'll have more Rising right after this.